Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss respect all to be happy, seeing the divine spark in all beings. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 11 members on Zoom, and people are still dialing in. And we do have a dozen members on our social media. Thanks, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you very much, Jam. And I like the title for today, Respect All to Be Happy. And I welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Even Prem Dam is here, coming all the way from Baltimore. Hey, Prem Dam, good to see you. And Karavind, Radhakripa, Denise is here, Jason is here, Terry is here, Nicholas, Catherine, Pratibha. Thanks for joining, everybody. Well, you're the early birds, so I'm happy that we can start together with a little introspection. I call it introspection because it's helpful not to get too intimidated by an idea of meditation per se, which is okay also. Med comes from a word which means to take remedial measures, and meditation is meant to be remedial, some remedy, a remedy for what ails me, which is a misconception, which makes me a bit of a misfit for the world. Misfit means I'm out of alignment and I feel it. So introspection is helpful because it points to what we're looking at. Spect means to look at. Intro means within. And one of the ways that we can become aligned is mentioned in today's topic, which is to learn respect. And we'll go into the definition of respect. When we hear it, when it hits our ears, we have a sense of honoring someone. But if you just look at the word itself, it means respect, to look back at something in a different way. You do it again. Don't look at it superficially, in other words. Look and see what's really there. This is one of the great directives of the Bhagavad Gita. Don't just look at the superficial. Try to see what's beneath it all. That helps in anything, doesn't it? For instance, in our lives, we may just go through the motions. In a relationship, for instance, we may not take time until it's too late to appreciate somebody, what they mean to us, and how we got into the relationship in the first place, and the kind of vows that we made to one another. So there is a way in which respect, re-looking at things, can be very helpful. And we'll talk about respect today. I had an experience not too long ago. Sometimes when my schedule permits, I go down to Washington Park, which is only about a 7-minute walk from my house. It's an amazing park. It's well maintained. There's actually a whole department that just works on Washington Park all day long. Lots of trees, benches. It's clean. And I go there, sit on one of the benches before anybody else gets up in the morning and wait for the sun to come up. And that's where I do some of my early morning meditations. It's nice to find a place like that if you can, either at your own house or somewhere nearby where you can get away from any screens, if that makes sense, and where nobody else can find you. Maybe keep it a secret place where nobody knows where you went. That helps too, to isolate, and then take time to meditate. I was given some, besides the main mantra I got from my spiritual master years ago, he gave me 7 other mantras to chant silently 3 times a day. And so it's one of the things that I do for my meditation is I go there and sit on the bench, and I'll say them slowly, and I'll look at each syllable really carefully. And one of the outcomes from that time that I took for myself to introspect was appreciating that I'm conscious. And I had this feeling, it was more visceral than it was intellectual, that consciousness is sacred. And I was thinking, wow, amazing. It's a way of respecting oneself and just thinking what I am is more important than what I have or what I think I am superficially. If I can appreciate my own consciousness, and then by extrapolation, at least philosophically and theoretically, according to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about how we're part of a greater entity, just like the sun is there, and then the sun rays are part of a greater entity, the sun, but they're the same quality. So if we can appreciate our own quality and realize its fire-like quality, consciousness has illumination naturally. You don't have to do anything to get it going. It's already there. It's always there. And that's a revelation also, to see that consciousness is always there. It never sleeps. And having a respect for consciousness, starting with our own consciousness, and think, wow, what I am as part of the whole is respectful and respectable, I should say. And if we have some respect for ourselves, not our false selves, the idea that I'm so great because I'm a man or a woman or a cat or a dog. Everybody thinks, hey, look, cat thinks I can climb a tree, you can't. Somebody else thinks I know how to code better than you, or whatever it might be. That's a temporary designation. According to the Bhagavad Gita, that's what's called ahankara, that which you're not actually doing. It's something else going on. But when we can come down to the core and see our own consciousness and feel it and appreciate it, that makes a foundation for the rest of the way we deal with everybody else. Because if we respect ourselves and our consciousness, then we'll start to see it in other people as well. What to speak of, trace it back to where's it all coming from. That's the kind of vision that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna intends to instill within us. One thing that's helpful is that it's not artificial. It is reality. And one of the proclamations of the Vedas, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam, is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. That is, try to discern which is real, that which always exists, it's always there, and that which is not real or illusory. And illusory doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that it's temporary. It's here today, gone tomorrow. So there's a difference between us, who are always there. We're always home, lights are on. We just put too many coverings on them to see the light, but we can easily go beyond the coverings and get a glimpse of who we are. So without too much more of that, I'm going to put on a little raga. First, I'm turning my apparatus here, this amazing Zooms thing that we have, from original sound. No, I'm turning it to original sound for musicians, and I just did that. Now I'm going to turn on some raga so that we can set the mood for a little introspection. And if you'd like to join me, close your eyes, sit up a little straighter than you were a moment ago, and be a yogi. Breathe. Just be here in the moment. Let go of all your plans. You don't worry about anything right now. Just be here and appreciate your own consciousness. So start by letting go, releasing any of the thoughts, anxieties, plans you have. Just let them float away. They'll all come back. And be there with your breath and appreciate the fact that your body is hooked up to the universe. That is, it's part of material nature. It's going on by its own accord. Your heart is keeping pace perfectly. Your breath also is something that's, although you think you're controlling it, and you can to some degree, it's going on in spite of us. All the functions of the body are another universe to us. They're not really us. They're part of the material nature. Who's us? The observer of it all. So be observant. Notice how that universe of your body that heals itself, that oxygenates the cells, processes we know nothing about, they're just going on. The antibodies in your blood, they're doing their work. You don't know anything about it. Nor do I. None of us know. We just know that we're in this body. And turn your awareness to the light of your own consciousness. Be observant of your awareness. It's a cognizance. You're not a stone, but you are a seer, a knower. We're the knower of this body. We're not the body. And consciousness can know itself. Just appreciate that your consciousness is luminous. You have intelligence, awareness. Through this body, you can feel. You can intuit. And then take a moment to adjust your attitude to the gateways of knowledge. First is humility, which means I know less than I think, I control less than I think, and I'm okay with it. I'm all right not knowing everything. I'm all right not controlling everything. Everything is going on. I'll do what I can with what I have, but let the whole world go on as it will anyway, without my intervention. It's all working perfectly. And just take a moment, if you can come back to your consciousness and be all right with just existing. Don't worry about what should be. Just worry about, or not worry, but be aware of what is. The word is means that which remains, never changes. And come back to your breath and take a nice deep inhalation. And on the exhalation, we'll say a 2-syllable mantra, which indicates the highest spiritual pleasure, Rama. Inhale and say Rama. And rub your fingers to hands together, wiggle your toes. Remember, you have this amazing biological robot you can drive around. You can think of stuff, you can do things, you can do service. Open your eyes, and we're back in the Zoom room. And the raga is gone, and now we're just going to talk. So today's talk is respect all to be happy. Happiness has to do with our perspective of the world. And there's a way in which the world is ordered. There are levels of energy in the world that we can become aware of, categories of energy, so we're not disappointed. We know which ones to interact with that actually lead to progress in our lives. And let's look at a couple slides, Jam. Everybody, today you can participate as much as you like. At any time, feel free to write things in the chat box. It makes things interesting. And if you like to speak up, just come on camera with an eager look on your face and I'll call on you, or JM will, or raise your hand and you can speak. So we're talking here about showing respect to all, but don't demand respect in return. This is a spiritual practice. This was taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the monk standing on the right there. He's embracing Ramananda Roy, who was a governor at the time. And monks and governors really didn't mix back then. They were in separate worlds, but it turned out that that governor named Ramananda Roy was highly enlightened being, even though he worked in the world and he had interactions on political levels, financial levels, and so forth. Nirali, were you going to say something? Because you came on with an eager look on your face, and then right after I said that, I didn't
No,
call
no.
you. Okay, okay, okay.
I took it literally, and then I
All right.
realized I needed to
Okay.
wait.
Well, if when any time you want to speak, as you know well, please do.
Will do.
And he met with the monk, Chaitanya. We call him the Golden Monk. He walked barefoot all across much of South India. It's a big continent. And he taught the system of bhakti yoga. And two of the most important tenets of this to change the way you see the world. It's a completely different experience. He gave these two instructions. He said, show respect to all and don't demand respect in return. In fact, we could even amend that word demand, don't expect respect. It just sounds funny, that's all. Okay, show respect to all, but don't expect any respect in return. Think about that for a minute. Can you do it? Could you do it for half an hour or an hour, especially with your closest friends or your spouse or anyone else? Now, just a disclaimer to this whole presentation, and that is, I know what's coming. If I show respect to everybody and I don't expect anything in return, everyone will just push me into the dustbin, and I'll be the doormat of the world. That's not what I'm suggesting here. I'm just saying it ahead of time because it may come up. It always does. It doesn't mean that we don't do due diligence. It doesn't mean that we give in to bullies. It doesn't mean that we're reckless in the way that we show respect to others, because some people have degraded themselves by their own choice in such a way that they don't deserve respect socially necessarily. Some people are put into places where they're incarcerated because society has decided there's a demarcation. If you cross it, then you don't deserve to live with everybody else with the same rights everyone has. So I'm not talking about making a mishmash and saying everyone's fine. What I am saying is there's a deeper level of respect we can have for all living beings, and that's what Chaitanya was talking about. And he said, practice it yourself and see how it changes the way you interact with the world. Respect all, and I'll talk about what that means according to the Golden Monk, and don't expect anything in return. That's even harder, because there's a way my ego is always hungry and saying, what about me? What about me? Think about any conversation you have anywhere, and you may notice an urge that you have, that you're thinking, when these people when there's a lull in the conversation, then I'm going to tell something to everybody that's a little better than what they're saying, and it's all about me. And if you just try for a while restraining that and see, am I okay not putting myself forward? And if somebody doesn't show you the kind of respect that you thought they should, what do you do about that? Okay, JM Nirali has spoken. Let's hear what she said.
Nirali says, people put you into spot to manipulate when they say yes once. They expect you to say yes to all they ask, which is not right. I respect, but it is manipulation, pressure that hurts. Not sure how to interact with those people.
I recommend that when you're in situations where people manipulate you for their own good, that you take action to make sure that you're not being mistreated. And that can be in a professional environment or on a personal level, in a family and so forth. It's helpful to speak up for yourself and very clearly tell people the ways in which you feel that you're being misused. It doesn't preclude having respect, which I'll go into in a moment because it's on a deeper level. But this is why I gave the preface, is because there are ways in which people may manipulate us in this world. And I do recommend doing due diligence. It's actually a kind of respect for people to give in detail the ways that you're feeling that they're disrespecting you. And there was an article written, or someone, an author, wrote about this called Nonviolent Communication. When you become objective and you say, what is it that's bothering me about the way that this person or persons are interacting with me? And if you're very precise about what it is that they're doing, and you also don't ascribe any intention to them, that's the sticking point.
Yeah.
So when you say, you meant to do this, you're out to get me. If you can take that part out of it and then just give a catalog of the reasons that you're being disturbed by the person, and then ask for better treatment, oftentimes it clears up the difficulty. And then there's a way in which, if they really do mean to do it and they're out to get you, that gets revealed as well. And then you can deal with that separately. So that's my disclaimer to the point about not expecting respect. It doesn't mean that people should manipulate you. You're not theirs to manipulate. That's not their duty to manipulate you unless you've signed up
You
for
say
it.
once nicely, right? Like, okay, it's not a big deal for me. And then they try to take every time they expect you to say yes for everything. So that's where, it's hard.
I don't recommend saying yes.
Yes.
If somebody
That I learned
disrespects
that.
us,
Yeah.
then it's not something that's okay.
Right.
And that's, as I said before, paradoxically, as part of respect for others is to be very clear with them about what your boundaries are. That really helps in having a respectful relationship.
Okay.
Thanks, Nirali, for airing that out to start with, because that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Yeah. Okay, Jam, back to the slides. And the story is that the golden monk met this governor, and he was a very powerful person. And he socially wasn't supposed to be interacting with a governor because he was a renounced monk. But first of all, they had a common interest, which was spirituality. And it turned out that that governor was a highly advanced person, even though you couldn't tell because he looked like a worldly person. So one thing is, the golden monk said, judge people by their qualities, not by their dress. And that includes the physical dress of this body. There are all kinds of isms where we categorize people according to their external feature, whatever it may be. There's speciesism. We say, oh, this one's better than that one because some are called pets and other called food. And then there's, different types of people. We say, are you from that class? You're from this class? Are you from this race or that race? And these are all external considerations that the golden monk said a wise person sees beyond that and finds out what the actual quality of the person is and judges individually. And then we have the definition of respect in the next slide. It's a noun. It's a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. So there's an old saying that gold is gold wherever you find it. You can find it in a place that you think, oh, I wouldn't want to go in there. But if the gold's in there, You say, oh yeah, that's gold. Doesn't matter if it was in a filthy place, you'd still take it out and appreciate that this is a superior metal. And so this was the Golden Monk's teaching, that you look for the abilities, the qualities, the achievements of someone, appreciate from that level. And in the next slide, we have a little more of a breakdown of the word re, which means back, and spectare means to look at. Literally, an act of looking back or often at one. And I mentioned this at the outset, and that is that when we learn to look beyond the superficial, look twice. Don't just look once and assume you know everything about someone, including don't miss who they are at the deepest level, which brings to the next slide. It's called universal respect and seeing beyond the body. So we have this picture which illustrates that there are millions of species of life. And what's the difference between one and another? Those who interact with various kinds of life are amazed. In fact, you don't even have to interact with that many. You can just watch the Nature Channel and see how are these living entities so smart. I mean, everyone's got some intelligence. I once went snorkeling in a country called Belize, and I was just hours watching the life forms down there interact with one another. They all have their own personalities and intelligence and defense systems, and they're really smart. And if you watch ants or spiders, every one of squirrels, don't get me started on squirrels, they all have a kind of intelligence that is obvious, and it's a symptom of life within. So this universal respect is what I started with talking about, which comes in the next slide, which is respect consciousness. And when you start with your own consciousness, you become aware, oh, I'm not my body. I'm the consciousness illuminating the body. And then you'll see in a squirrel, oh, there's also a consciousness within the squirrel. And it's illuminating the squirrel. And if you look at a squirrel and he looks at you, there'll be some kind of cognition. If you look at a rock, you're not going to find any exchange between you and a rock, because a rock doesn't have consciousness, but a squirrel does. So does a spider. I once met a spider right here where I'm sitting. I came in and he was on my desk. And I looked at him and said, hey, what are you doing here? And he looked at me saying, hey, what are you doing here? And because I'm bigger than him, although I wouldn't ever hurt a spider, he thought, maybe I'll take off now, because he looked at me and I could see we were eye to eye. And then he turned around and walked off, more like ran off. And I said, hey, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. And we did have a meeting. And there was a conscious awareness between he and I suppose. I don't know if it was a he or she, but there was a sense of a conscious contact. So one of the ways that this universal respect is described in the ancient wisdom literatures comes in the next slide at a book called the Ishopanishad. I've referred to this before, and it goes like this. This is one of the verses. He who sees systematically everything in relation to the Supreme, who sees all living entities as parts of the Supreme, and who sees the Supreme within everything, never hates anything or any being. So there's a way in which when I see externally, I can make designations. I like this one, I don't like that one. It's based on some kind of preconceived notion and conditioning, based on this idea that some people are my friends, some people are my enemies. But these ancient wisdom literatures say, see beyond that. The next one says, one who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks in quality one with the Supreme becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him or her? So there's a way in which we're spiritual sparks. And when we see within any body that we look at, whether it's a tree or a squirrel or a spider. We notice the conscious spark is there. It's universal. It's the same spark, comes from the same source, and we're the same quality. In a human body, we may have an apparatus that gives more facility for instance, thinking about causality than a spider does, or a squirrel, or a plant for that matter. These are different outlets for that spiritual impetus or soul or spark within each body. What I mean is each body has a different capacity, but the same spiritual entity is within each of the bodies. And that leads to this universal sense of respect. And that comes in the next slide. This is a direct verse from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, misspelled because of the font difference caused by a mismatch in technology, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, outcast. So there's a way these terminologies are describing, this verse is describing the ways in which there may be different bodies, different classes of people, different species, but a wise person, in fact, somebody who has knowledge, is one who is able to see the spiritual spark within each one of those bodies and respect it, because he or she is seeing that that's divine, it's sacred, it's life. Life is sacred. And the next one says, one who observes the birth of a tree from its seed and the ultimate death of the tree after maturity certainly remains a distinct observer separate from the tree. In the same way, the witness of the birth and death of the material body remains separate from it. That's on an individual level when we see that our body, like a tree, starts from a seed, it grows up, it comes to maturity, and then it withers. And similarly, we can observe our body going through these changes, and we can notice that we're not our bodies. And skip the next slide because I already said it. And then the one with the next picture on it says, don't be a doormat. We don't tolerate bullying, tyranny, or wanton violence. And finally, number 13 says, respect some living beings from a distance. So I'll just say something about that. And that is, you see this person apparently out for a walk and sees a tiger up in the distance on that boulder. Well, there's the Ishopanishad and the other ancient wisdom literatures are not suggesting anything in practical or artificial that, oh, tiger's alive, I'm alive. There's a divine spark within each of us. Therefore, I'll walk over there and try to pet the tiger. Doesn't that seem like it would be a perilous endeavor that you go there and who knows, that tiger could just jump down and attack. He might attack at this distance too. I wouldn't even be standing there. Where's that person? So there's this dichotomy. We're in a material world, but we're spiritual sparks. And the spiritual spark that's within the body of a tiger is not fully conscious that, oh, there's a person, I won't harm him. In fact, he may think because of his nature, his inbred nature as a tiger, that looks like a nice snack. So he may jump over there. So we don't artificially try to press this idea that I'll get close to everybody and treat everybody equally on the material level, because they're not able to reciprocate like that. So there's the dichotomy. When we say all living beings are created equally, there's a way that's very parallel with what the ancient teachings are. But then there's consideration, many different considerations, how we interact with people. For instance, do you want to befriend every human being you meet? There are some that maybe not, you may think, not so much. Is that possible? And yeah. Okay, let's have a few comments. I've been yakking for a while here. Let's see what everybody else has to say. Go ahead, Jam. Fill me in, and anybody else who wants to speak, it's a free room. Please go ahead.
Gauri is asking a question. She is not familiar with Isha Upanishad. Could you please provide me with some more context about what it is?
Sure. There's 108 main Upanishads. Upanishads are a summary of the Vedas. The Vedas are ancient wisdom literatures that tell how to live life in this world in harmony with the world. And then you get the transcendental part of the Vedas, which are the Upanishads, which start to talk about the difference between matter and spirit. There are many Upanishads, but there are 108 main Upanishads, according to the great teachers of India. It's a consensus. And one of those is called Ishopanishad. And of course, Isha is the word which means the controller. So there is a supreme spirit that controls everything. That's the idea. That's Isha. When you put it next to Upanishad, because the two vowels and Sandhi rules in Sanskrit, you get Isho. So Isho and then Panishad. And for those who are interested in the deeper meanings and the etymology of words, Upanishad means to sit up close. So literally it means when you get interested in something deeper in life, you want to find a wisdom source, a teacher, and the literature to go with that you can sit up close and listen to because you've found a higher purpose in life. So you lean in, Upanishad. So the Isha Upanishad is a thing. It's got 18 verses plus an invocation. Starts with a very famous invocation, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate, which means that the world's perfect and it comes from a perfect source. And one of the teachings from that is that all forms of imperfection that we feel in this world are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. When we become fully aware of who we are and what our source is, then we don't feel incomplete. And the next verse, or actually that's the invocation. So the first verse out of 18 says, Ishavasyam idang sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagatina tyaktena bunjita magradhaka saswadanam, which is what I like to say is the verse that solves all your problems. Do you want to hear the verse that solves all your problems? I need a quorum, otherwise I can't say it. Only JM put up a heart, and we get some thumbs up coming from Carvin and Radhakripa. Aditi said yes. Aditi Somani said yes. Manu said yes. Raj said yes. Everybody else, close your ears. Okay, Arvind, thank you. What it says, and this is really the namesake of the book itself, Ishopanishad, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat, which means that we don't own anything in this world. See, I just solved all your problems. My problem is I think I own and control everything. And then when it doesn't go my way, I say, why is everybody so mean to me? Why is the universe against me? And give me my stuff back. But actually, if you take the first verse of Ishopanishad as a clear directive, everything in the universe is controlled and owned by somebody else, and it's not us. Like the priest who said, there is a God, I'm not him. So there's a way that it says, Tena Tyaktena Bunjita, nonetheless, you're given a quota. And if you take your quota, there's plenty, there's so much. Just in my backyard here in Burlingame, and it's not a sprawling backyard. This is not the Great Gatsby here, but it's good for me. I come back here after long trips and I got a garden to repair too. And I have a Fuji apple tree. It gives so many apples, I can feed the whole neighborhood. I have 2 fig trees. I could feed the whole county with fig tree. And I have 3 raised beds. There are enough zucchini and tomatoes and everything for whoever wants to come over. You're all invited. Come over. I'll feed you salad or any kind of zucchini preparations for the next 3 weeks. And I barely did anything. All I did is put a few seeds out and plant a tree here and there. And I mean, there's more. And so Tena Taktena Bunjita means there's an arrangement in nature to take care of everybody. My little teachers, the squirrels, I call them my gurus, they live in the backyard here. And I always check them out because they're always teaching me something. Is we're fine. We don't have insurance. It's like, you guys need a house? And no, we're good. Uh, in the wintertime, when I come back from my retreat in India, I leave in October, I come back in December. They're back there with a brand new coat and they didn't go online. No Amazon Prime. There's an Amazon Prime built right into nature, delivered to their door without cost. Hey, little squirrel, free coat. He didn't even know he got it. That's Tena Tektena Bunjita. Everyone gets their own quota here in the world, but it says don't encroach. Don't try to take more. Don't be a ball hog and steal stuff from other people. Just live according to what's given to you so you can have vitality, live in harmony with others, and use your life for spiritual realization. So the Sri Ishopanishad is a fantastic book. One of the first I ever studied when I got interested in Eastern philosophy. And it's really not even Eastern. It's just universal knowledge. It's universal knowledge that goes beyond the superficiality of this world that we are all so sick of, aren't we? Doesn't it get tedious dealing with those who are absorbed in superficiality? Please say yes. Or at least give a thumbs up. Okay, thanks, Jason. All right. What else do we have there, JM?
Gauri is asking, is there a shorter version of Ishopanishad book?
Shorter version, it's only 18 verses. It's one of the shortest books you're ever going to get. You can go through that book very quickly, the 18 verses. In fact, I recommend it. And read them and go through. Book will take you a day and a half to read the whole, no, maybe a week. It's not thick. It's not big. Yeah.
So I did post a link in case Gauri, you're interested, you can read it.
Well, that was generous. How thoughtful are you, JM? Putting up links out there.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments, reflections? Anything that you liked?
Wait a
You want
minute.
to
What did
relay
you
back?
say? Questions, comments, reflections. What else? Exclamations, emojis. Express yourself. Okay, back to the slides. Somebody interrupt me though.
Gauri had Gauri just came online. Gauri, go ahead.
Oh, Gori. Good. Gori's here. Go ahead, Gori.
Thanks so much, for sharing this. Oh my God, I'm looking at it on my another screen. This is really a short version, and I'm feeling really happy about it. Thank you so much for sharing this asset of Isopnishad. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Gori. And I have kids groups. One of them's called Youth Jam. I've been working with them for years, and I teach this to kids, the whole Sri Upanishad. In fact, starting with, I don't know, what's an age where kids can start to read? I can't remember when I learned to read. First
7.
grade, kindergarten, nowadays probably preschool. What's the age, do you think, Gori, that kids start to learn to read?
Probably to understand the meaning of this, maybe seven
Okay,
year.
7-year-old. I've been dealing with 7-year-olds on upward, and we sit in a group and we recite the Sri Upanishad, both English and the Sanskrit. In fact, there's a study you can look up online. It's called the Sanskrit effect. It was a study done, I believe, in the UK, but I could be wrong about that part. But it is a academic study about the effects of reciting Sanskrit verses and how it enhances the brains of young people who do that. In any case, that's a side point. But we were able to memorize the whole thing. They were able to memorize the whole thing within a month. And just hearing it, reciting it over and over again. And then it's such a nice exercise. It's one of the recommended spiritual practices to go through the verses and look at them carefully and then try to apply them in one's life. So the Ishavashamidam Sarvam verse, the number 1, just it can roll off your tongue, go in one ear and out the other, as they say. But if you actually try to apply it and think, oh, nothing belongs to me. Everything here in the universe is just for my, it's paraphernalia for me to use in service, then you're living in a way that you will not be overcome by anxiety or affected by adverse reactions called V-karma. Okay, Jam, I have a couple more slides, I think.
Yeah, I just want to bring up Jean's point. She was saying, I think showing respect means being truthful in a way that is kind. You can say no to something in a kind way. It's all about attitude and manner.
God, I love that. Thanks for bringing that up, Jean. It's so important. It's a point that Krishna brings up in the Bhagavad Gita when he talks about ways of speech. And he says you should speak truthfully, beneficially, and avoiding speech that offends. And you should also regularly recite the Vedas. And so he said, these are the austerities of speech. And they're very much in parallel with what you just said. And isn't it true also, Jean, that people can tell from your tone of voice whether you're respecting them or not? I just remember from my mother saying things like, I don't like your tone of voice. You might say the right thing, but you may say it with the wrong tone. And it's interesting how when we have respect for others and we speak to them, then that comes out in our voice also. And even if we're not able to perfectly articulate, thanks, Jean, I saw that people get the feeling from you that you have respect for them. Yeah, as far as social interaction goes, it's better to move about the world in a respectful way and not become people's adversaries, because it'll come back. Back to the shelter of my slide deck. This is a talk I gave at Intel, I think. I was hoping someone would Photoshop me out, but there's a slide in back, and it was one of the topics that we were talking about. But this was a declaration given by one of the great teachers of Bhakti that says, and I know you can read fine, but I'm going to say it anyway. Intrinsic in every living being is the ability to rise in course of time. And why do I bring that up? Because part of respect is seeing the potentiality of every living being. In other words, you may see somebody that it's in a state of consciousness because of what they've been through. And they may look either downtrodden, or their behavior may be objectionable, or their demeanor, or their physical state, or any of that. But those who have this deep understanding that we're not our bodies, and the history of the body is relatively short, the soul or the spirit has no history, it's eternal. We're just moving through various situations. We may be able to show respect knowing that what's beyond the body is a self-organizing entity. Consciousness is amazing. And every living being has the wherewithal, dormant, perhaps in some, to improve him or herself in due course of time. Just need two things, knowledge and practice. And so there's an old saying that in the way of respect, that some people judge people by their past. Other people, they take them in their present condition and they disregard the past to some extent. But those who are of the highest mind, they respect people according to their future potential. And that's what comes out of this sense of seeing beyond just the body and appreciating the soul. And that brings me to this last slide, which is respect in action. So what to do about it? I'm talking all this philosophy or giving theoretical ideas. What are some of the ways to think about it? Fan the spark. That's a moniker I took up years ago because I heard it from my teacher, and I think it's a good philosophy in life, fan the spark. So if you think about it philosophically in the context of which I've been speaking today, that the spark is the soul. The spark is the consciousness, the conscious entity within each body that we see. And what do you do with a spark? If you've ever built a fire before, if you can see a spark within the fireplace or wherever you built the fire. I learned this from my father. He used to take me camping. It was counterintuitive to me as a kid that you blow on it or you fan it, because I thought that'll put it out. He said, no, you fan it and it'll grow. It gets oxygen from your fanning it, and that's what it needs to grow. So there's a way in which everybody needs some fanning. That's why people who want to excel in anything, they go get a teacher. Good luck going to school by yourself and learning everything on YouTube. You need a teacher who inspires you. How many of you here have ever, throughout all your days of school, assuming everyone here has been to school, found a teacher that inspired you? Mine was Mr. Weber, third grade. He was such an encourager, and he knew how to fan everyone's spark in the class. And I just remember coming out of third grade thinking, I got this, I can do this. Before that, I was a little morose going through first, second grade. It's kind of a drag. But third grade, after Mr. Weber, ready to go. So he knew how to fan the spark in his students. And a spiritually minded person disregards the external feature of others to the degree I talked about. There are delimiting factors that I talked with the tiger and the sage. And we also don't try to annoy people who don't want to have their spark fanned. But wherever you see an opportunity, there's a way in which it's the greatest occupation that anyone could have, is to learn how to take that spark and have it conflagrate and come into a fire, and to encourage people. So one of the directives for spiritual practice is to fan the spark in others. So here's a few points for that fan the spark context. One says, remember the body's temporary designation. The consciousness within is permanent. That's something we talked about ad infinitum in this last hour. Then see the potential within everyone, and then fan the spark of knowledge and devotion. So I mentioned earlier two things we need: knowledge and practice. So one of the best ways to enliven the soul within, especially human bodies, is to distribute knowledge. Give an opportunity for something that's structured. They say, here's what you can do about it, how you can learn, and here's a process you can take up. These are what are recommended to be the best of ways in which to fan the spark in others, is to impart knowledge. For instance, Sri Upanishad I received because somebody took the trouble to translate it into English. And I found it at a bookshop in Berkeley, California called Shambhala Books, which is no longer open, but it was back in the early 70s. And that's when I needed it. And I found it, and it really changed my perspective on everything. And that's possible through transcendental knowledge. So the ancient teachings say, edify yourself through knowledge, and then have a practice so that you can fan your own spark, and then be a light in the world so that you can help other people. Because unless you have a transcendental system, a way to rise above the influences of material nature, which are so strong, the tendency is for us to get dragged down, distracted, and waylaid. Unless you have a practice and you have the knowledge of how to do it, that it's very difficult to withstand the forces of the material world. And even the most successful person ends up thinking at the end of life, like, why couldn't I have been more purposeful? Why didn't I do the things that I needed to do to express my appreciation for others? And that all comes from spiritual practice. Okay, now you have 5 minutes to expound, pontificate, give opinions, criticize everything I've said. Whatever you'd like to do, please feel free. It's an open room and forum.
I have one comment.
Yes, please.
It is hard sometimes. I mean, when I see some people on opposite side and I see some people on our side, that is even better. I'm like, oh, we instantly connect. It's like, oh yeah, you do this ISKCON thing. I just met a friend. She's in Roseville, and she's like, oh, I see you on Vaisit's class sometimes in the Facebook, and I'm like, oh wow. So it's like, we have easier conversation than from there, inspire each other. But then there are people and friends that they are going opposite. They would question everything, like, why is Radha Krishna thing is different? It's like, they would question things that they didn't do before, like a doubts. And I feel like, man, what to tell them, not to doubt. But it's like I told that, sometimes like, yeah, maybe Dvait is not for you, dualism. Maybe then go to the Advait side, right? But it hurts when you see people going in the wrong direction, and I'm not in a position to, like uh give a lecture, you know what I mean?
I
Or
do, yeah,
turn their mind, you know what I mean? And I know
I
I'm
do.
not there yet.
No, I totally get that. And
Right.
I'll give you some context from the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam gives this directive, which I started to talk about respect some people from a distance. You don't have to try to
Right.
influence everybody. First, save yourself.
Right.
Because,
That's what I'm now questioning.
the
Like,
best way
maybe
to
I have a wrong
teach is,
circle of friends, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, it's by example that we teach. But also the Srimad Bhagavatam says, uh, don't annoy people who aren't open to being taught. Find people who are already open. And if you have something worthy to say, they're intelligent, you can offer it to them. And if they let them take it. Otherwise, it's not our duty to give free advice here, there, and
Right.
everywhere. And
Right.
and that's another point. It's in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in the austerities of speech, is be careful who you try to advise, because not everybody signed up for it. And
Right.
nobody really appreciates somebody who just kind of tries to intervene and say, no, you've got it all
Yeah.
wrong. I'll tell you the way it is.
Right.
What
I
is
want to
it?
argue with people, and I
You
don't
can
think I
lead
have
a horse to
energy.
water, but you can't make him drink. You can lead a
Exactly.
man of wisdom, but you can't make him think.
Yeah.
Man
Yeah.
convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Yeah.
So that all these types of ancient sayings
Mhm.
or old sayings.
I feel bad for them, it hurts. I'm like, should I, send them a lecture? Should I send
Well,
them
I
a
feel
link?
bad for
But then
myself
I'm like,
because I
yeah.
barely ever take my own advice. And it's good to start with oneself. I had
Exactly.
a
We are working
colleague.
on it ourselves, right?
Yeah, that's it. One of my colleagues used to say, people ask him, because he looked like a monk. So he said, what's your religion? And he'd say, my religion is finding my own faults and trying to fix them as
Right.
an example for society. And it's, if you bring it down to that level, then people naturally will inquire more about, well, what are you doing?
Mhm.
And I've found people who are doing some spiritual practice, they go home to their family, and then their family, at first they may say, think that it's
Yeah.
funny, or they may make fun of it. But then after a while, they start thinking, they'll ask, oh, did you do it today? Did you finish your chanting and
Right.
all these types of things? And
Yes.
they start to, it affects everybody.
Interesting. Yes.
But,
Yes.
everyone's positioned in a certain way in this world that I'm in my thing. My thing's the best. I don't want to be imposed upon. And until there's
Correct.
kind of existential realization that, well, maybe there are other ideas in the world, and people are open to them, it's always a little bit troublesome to try to interject in people's
Yeah,
lives.
it
That's
is.
my
But I
experience.
do best thing I can do is influence my kids, in the sense I give a little bit here and there. We read Bhagavatam together, things like that.
Yeah.
Have some routine in the three three times, before eating, before, sleeping, all those little bit routines to remind
Well,
that you
kids
are
are the
not
best,
alone.
because when
Yes.
you have kids, they're just really amazing little beings, and
Yes.
to
And I'm
be able to
glad they
give them the
listen for
best.
now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thanks, Nirali.
Thanks.
JM, what should we do? We're out of time. I have changed my entire set of friends since I started reading ancient wisdom literatures like Bhagavad Gita. It just makes it easier. Aditi, thanks. And as she said, it's one thing that you walk away from adults who are not receptive, but kids, teens are a different category. How can we help them? Well, I've been working with that for a long time. That's why I appreciate them so much. They're all potential. And I've had, uh, I, I can't say much more about it now, except for it's worth the investment, because when kids start off in the beginning of life with some parameters for how to live in the world in wise ways, then, and they can imbibe those, it gives them a foundation for the rest of their lives. Final statements. Thank you, JM, for keeping the lights on. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. It was a lot of fun for me and great to see you all. And we can remember our friends who are great encouragers, the yogis who live high in the Himalayas, and they come out of their caves every once in a while, and they like to encourage one another. So they have a custom. They raise their hands high in the air. A lot of power comes from your hands. You know, if you just do this, there's some kind of beam that comes out, and then you say the words Hari Bol, then it's like you
Haribol.
give some spiritual encouragement. Hari Bol.
Haribol!
Haribol.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see
Thank
you. Keep up the great work. Keep the transcendental vibration going, and I'll see you soon, I hope. Hari Bol.